we have the incredible privilege of celebrating 15 years together as an organization. And what a journey it's been. Many of you guys have played a crucial role in providing hope to so many people all around the world. Tonight we want to share some of those stories with you all. But first, I want to go back to the start of it all and share with you guys my side of the story. It was late one night in 2009, and I was just tucking myself in for my beauty sleep. My mom walked into the room, and she told me that she had some exciting news that she wanted to share with me. She told me that she wanted to start a brand new nonprofit that would bring hope to people all around the world. I looked at her, and I said, cool. And then I went to sleep without thinking much of it. I went to school and worried about trying to find a homecoming date and not looking like a total dork in my freshman year. And while I was playing in the pool, she was writing down names on napkins for what this organization would be. That is literally me the day that she was coming up with the name. While I was flirting with the girl from church, she was getting the word out, and while I was making Ndamukong Suh for Heisman t-shirts, she was emailing Charlie Obro about the start of this new organization, the Hope Venture. And when that happened, a little girl named Gayatri became the first person to receive a backpack, and the Hope Venture had officially impacted a life. And in this moment, I've kind of realized that the story that I'm going to tell with you guys is kind of the story of my worldview expanding. At this moment, when Gayatri got a backpack, though I didn't know it at the time, another person was added to my own story. My life wouldn't just be about me. But if I'm honest with you all, that wasn't a quick process. Throughout high school, things like girls and music and driving my mid-1990 Oldsmobile around town seemed far more interesting than a global nonprofit. I mean, look at that thing, that was a classic. But that was all about to change. It was the summer of 2012, and I was on my way to India for the very first time. I had saved up my money to try and give 25 kids there backpacks. When I arrived in India, I saw things I had never seen before. Women doing back-breaking labor, sprawling slums, kids digging through the trash just to find a meal, and thatched roof homes that were no bigger than my own closet. But I also got to see people that knew how to make a difference. I got to meet Charlie, the partner I told you about earlier that helped start this whole thing with my mom. And in this moment, I realized something clicked for me. I realized that my mom had started something pretty amazing, and I wanted to be a part of it. So it's now 2012, and the Hope Venture has already started 9 projects in 3 different countries. Together with the $250 that I had raised, along with 460 other donors, many of whom are still in this room today, the impact began to climb. 17 kids got high school sponsorships, 28 women received tailoring training, 200 kids were in schools now, 130 goats distributed, hundreds of people receiving clean water, and 5,975 more backpacks, getting us to a total of 6,575 total people impacted by this little organization right here in Lincoln, Nebraska. But we won't stop there. It's not stopping there. From Keith and Katie's basement, it continued to grow. I started designing t-shirts and joining meetings at the Starbucks on 27th and Pine Lake, and bringing my mom the occasional cheesesteak. I mean, who doesn't love cheesesteak? This whole thing was becoming legit, as my mom used to say. But me, I was at a pretty critical moment in my own story. I had just gotten married to the most amazing woman, and we had graduated college, and we were starting our careers together. I had always wanted to be an architect, so I got an internship right here in Lincoln. But I had my sights set on some East Coast firms. So, that December, Victoria and I got in our 95 Pathfinder and headed to Philly and Boston to visit firms out there. But right when we arrived into Philly, I got an email from my contact there saying that she was sick and I couldn't come see her. Determined though, I went anyways, and I snuck in behind some other worker. Talking to the front desk worker, I asked her if I could just meet some people there, and after checking with her boss, she said I could merely peek my head into the space. These people were heroes of mine. But when I looked into the space, all I could see was a sea of gray desks. No one would even talk to me. Well, there's always Boston. Back onto the interstate we went, and we were excited for another chance to try, but after 30 minutes, I put my foot to the pedal and the car hardly moved. Barely making it off the interstate, we putted along into a little Firestone, where the employee there told us that your car will never drive again. 2 doors closed just like that. But thankfully, we had one other place we wanted to visit on this trip. But this time it wasn't an architecture firm. It was a growing nonprofit called Charity Water. And after arriving late from parking in downtown New York, Vic and I were running to get there on time. We raced through the park, past people playing chess, through bustling intersections and into a Manhattan building lobby we hoped was right. And fearing another letdown, we tried to keep our hopes down, but this time, the experience was absolutely incredible. This was one of the most life-changing and alive and energetic offices I've ever been. And they were changing the world, one well at a time. But the whole time I went around Charity Water and I got a tour, got to hear about how they operated, I couldn't help but keep thinking about this growing nonprofit that was right under my nose back home. So, as I headed back to Lincoln, through a miracle and some guy from my uncle's soccer team, that little Pathfinder was back up and running, baby. Yes. Okay, so as I headed back to Lincoln, I started to think about where my life was headed. And though I didn't really know it at this time, my path started to shift. About a year later, my mom offered me a job full-time at the Hope Venture. And although I had always seen myself as an architect, I realized that I had the chance to build something that was changing thousands of people's lives. I had always seen myself doing drawings and design, but I realized that you build something that changes lives by saying yes to the life-changing opportunities that are already in front of you. And when you do, you can create something that's truly amazing. So, I said yes, and I jumped into this adventure full-time. I started out by drawing graphics and creating videos. Then we dreamt up this amazing night of music, art, and stories, and A Night for Hope was born. We added more people into the mix, and we pushed ourselves to bring new stories and new opportunities to you all. And then, in the summer of 2019, I found myself in a remote area of India called Jawada Hills. We were there to film stories that we were going to show to you all at our 10th anniversary party for A Night for Hope right here at the Rococo Theater. I actually stood right back there at the sound booth as we put $53,000 up onto this screen, and we asked you all if you wanted to be a part of it. I was the one pushing the button that made the counter go up as the money started to flow in, and within a couple minutes, you guys blew us away, and we raised way more than $53,000. It was absolutely amazing. God was doing something, and I got to have a front row seat. Okay, it is now 2019, and the Hope Venture's impact has started to skyrocket, all the way up to 53,000 people impacted. Absolutely amazing. People like Balamurugan, Balakrishnan, and Sukumaran, who were total orphans. They lost their parents. But thankfully, our partner Sundar Singh would go every day on his little scooter to pick them up and bring them to our feeding center, where they got a daily meal, tutoring, and a community that cared about them. Or people like Teopista, who was abused by her own father, but now was safe and was getting an education. 53,000 people in 10 years. This was working, and we weren't stopping there. It was a typical Thursday morning, and a few of us staff were working from the Bay Coffee Shop when, and the day before, we had excitedly announced the launch of 4 new centers in Jawada Hills due to the Night for Hope funding. We were getting ready for our biggest run for hope yet, and I was sipping a great coffee. All of a sudden, there was a stir in the room as students started showing each other their phones. UNL had canceled class due to this coronavirus that we were hearing about. Some students were panicking, others were planning their own vacations, but either way it became clear that the next few months wouldn't look the same. Then 6 days later, India, Uganda, and Kenya closed all of their schools. Then we went fully remote. We canceled our summer trips, we switched to a virtual run for hope, and all of a sudden I found myself walking through empty streets in my neighborhood with my wife and brother, realizing this year wouldn't be the same. We continue to hear stories from our partners about how lockdowns created massive challenges for both them and our recipients. And then George Floyd was killed, and all kinds of injustice in our own communities came to light. I wanted to care. I wanted to do what was right. But in this moment, I realized that I didn't know what to do. I didn't have all the answers. Everyone was posting a black square on Instagram for Black Lives Matter, so I posted one. But then everyone started yelling at each other for posting just a post, so I took mine down. I was rattled by the stories that I heard, but in this moment, I realized that although I had been trying to be humble, I had been trying to love people, I didn't fully understand my own privilege. During COVID, I didn't have to worry about things that so many others did. I mean, I had a fully stocked fridge. I was cooking up fresh lobster just for the fun of it. I mean, I had a nice computer and Zoom, and I never had to lose my job, and I never had to worry about my safety because of my skin color. More than that, I realized that over the course of my life, so many of the doors that had been opened for me were open because of where I was born or because of the color of my skin. And I started to wonder, what do I do about that? Many of us were wondering, what do we do about that? Some of us were arguing bitterly about it. Nobody wants to be oppressed, and nobody wants to be an oppressor. But in 2020, many of us were trying to reckon with our own stories. At the Hope Venture, we believe that all people have dignity. And we believe that as Christians, we need to care about that. And we need to care for people who've been oppressed, whose dignity has been violated. And the sad truth is that there are so many people all around the world whose dignity hasn't been shown to them. There are people all around the world, and even right here in our own city. As I started to process this, I began to talk to people, and I was asking God, what do I do about this? And if I'm honest with you all, there wasn't an immediate answer. I didn't know what to do, and I still even wrestle with this. But one thing that has stood out to me over the years has come from a verse that my mom made me memorize as a kid. And I realized that I had been made rich in so many ways, and I had the opportunity to be generous in so many ways. And that was a generosity that was changing lives. It was changing a lot of people's lives. And so, my answer has kind of been just to keep saying yes. To say yes to the occasions to be generous. And somehow, there have been more and more opportunities for that as the years have gone by. And that takes us all the way up to 3 months ago. I boarded a plane to head to Kenya to meet up with our media team there. We were there to film stories that we're actually going to show you later tonight. We filmed in a couple different locations, and then we went to meet up with our partner Fanwell in Mathare. Mathare is a really poor neighborhood in Nairobi, the capital city of Kenya. My plan there was to connect with Fanwell, see how he was doing, and maybe get a couple shots in the area. But he had lined up home after home for us to visit. So, we went home after home, hearing family after family's stories. And there's one story that I heard this summer that has stuck with me, and I want to share it with you all tonight. It's the story about a girl named Diana. I got to sit down with Diana in her own home and hear her story. And she shared about a really hard day that happened earlier this summer. She started by saying that that night, her and her sister and her mom went to bed while their dad was out drinking. Then, at 3 in the morning, they woke up to screaming outside their house. They rushed to the door, and they saw water just coming up the street. There was a flood that was ripping through Mathare, causing all kinds of devastation. As they looked at the water, they looked down the hill, and the houses that were below them were just gone, washed away. They fled immediately, running up the hill to get to safety. They left everything behind. And that night, they lost everything. They lost their home, they lost their stuff. They had to sleep outside for a week before our partner was able to get them a new place to stay. And in the process, Diana's mom started to get sick. Apparently, she had a pre-existing heart condition that flared up during the stress of the whole situation. So, worried, Diana called our partner Fanwell and asked what to do. He sent a motorcycle and some money to take them to the clinic so that they could get her checked out. But the clinic then told them they couldn't help. She had to go to the hospital. So Diana called Fanwell again. He sent more money and another bike, and he rushed to meet them at the hospital. At the hospital, they put Diana's mom on oxygen. But then at this point in the story, Fanwell looked at me and he told me the oxygen costs 500 shillings per hour, so they had to take her off because the cost was too high. She died shortly after that. At this point in the story, my body filled with grief because 500 shillings is only $5. I was sitting 2 feet from this girl, and she was telling me that she had to say goodbye to her own mom because $5 an hour was too high a cost. That night, I went back to the hotel and I just sat alone and cried. This year, honestly, it hasn't been easy for me. But my mom is alive, my family is safe, and I have insurance and so many things to protect me if something were to go wrong. If I'm honest with you guys, sometimes these stories, they just start to feel normal. I've heard a lot of stories. I've worked here for a while. But I've started to realize that sometimes I'm seeing what I would now call sunny day poverty. I mean, when you visit somebody on a sunny day and they're excited to host a new person, you might think their life seems pretty normal. You might even think, these people are happy. I'm not sure what we even need to do here. But I think when you visit somebody on a sunny day and you're with good people, most of us don't need a lot to be happy in that moment. But when the flood comes, somebody that makes $2 a day has a very, very different story than I do. And that is the privilege that I have. So when I left Matare, it was so hard for me to just leave Diana and go back to my own life. I didn't know how to do it. The only way that I was able to is knowing that Phanuel isn't leaving. He's staying, and he's committed to trying to provide a better future for Diana. I'm so grieved that our generosity, it can't do anything to help with Diana's mom. That's already happened. We can't change that. But our generosity can do something about Diana's future. We can continue to open doors for her and provide hope for her. Now, thanks to donors like you guys, Diana is getting an education. She's in college. She's studying business. And Phanuel is continuing to do all that he can to provide more opportunities for her. And he is committed to doing that for so many people like her. And honestly, that's kind of the story of the Hope Venture. For the last 15 years, there have been so many partners like Phanuel that have provided for so many people like Diana. And tonight, I'm so excited to announce to you guys that that impact has only continued to climb. From 53,000 people, it's risen and risen and risen, and tonight we've hit a milestone, and drum roll please. We've reached over 100,000 people. That's so crazy. And do you remember where we started? One little girl named Gayatri? Well, earlier this year, our partner Charlie surprised us, and he reconnected us with her.
Nephew, no? We told that I have a burden to lead something. Then we went to this village. So when Chair was going to that village, so you asked him who is the first person. So this is the first person.
Oh, this is sweet. Oh my goodness.
Wow.
Look at that.
Wow.
Oh my gosh.
He wants to take this.
So this really helped me a lot in changing things, and I still use this back in my office also. Yeah. So I almost completed my graduation and now also pursuing my PGDM in business administration, along with which I'm working for Allometra as a US international voice process for Amazon. Wow!
15 years ago, I was just a teenager in my bedroom, and I had no idea all of what was going to happen in my life. But 15 years later, somehow, I have gotten to be a part of helping 100,000 people find hope. And so many of you guys have been right alongside me. You've given so generously over all of these years, and you guys, I am seriously so grateful, because it matters. Your generosity, it matters. It's impacting thousands of people's lives. 100,000 people's lives. That's 100,000 Dianas. That's more than Memorial Stadium full of people that have received your generosity. Absolutely crazy. And we want to celebrate that tonight. As you walked in, you might have seen a bunch of stacks of cards in the entryway. Each one of those cards represents a life impacted by the Hope Venture and by you guys. And so as you leave tonight, feel free to take a card or two to remember the people impacted. That little display is meant to represent 100,000 people. But we also wanted to give you a deeper dive into some of these stories. I wish I could share all 100,000 stories with you tonight, but obviously we don't have time for that. So we gave you guys each a little book called 100,000. It's on your tables or on your chairs, and in it you'll find 50 stories of people impacted, all the way from Gayatri up to this year. And so I hope that you guys get a chance to look at those stories and see the impact that you have made. So many people have continued to gather year after year, right here in the Rococo Theater, and make an impact. People have gathered from around our city and around the world to share what they have with others. And if this is your first time with us, well, welcome. You're a part of it now too. 100,000 people in 15 years. That is something to celebrate.